In the last cell, there was a dog as black as coal. His gray eyes, though, were intelligent. The dog sniffed the air, noting both a familiar smell and an unfamiliar smell. The familiar smell was of rotting flesh, which was the common smell of a dementor. The unfamiliar smell was of a flowery perfume, an expensive one at that, and roast beef. Whoever had the flowery perfume had eaten roast beef for lunch and drank muscadine wine. Sensing a special visitor, the dog started to morph back into its true shape, that of a bushy-haired man with a weak chin, but the same intelligent gray eyes. Like Bellatrix, he went up to the cell door's window to greet this wonderful-smelling visitor. "Good afternoon, Mr. Black," Cornelius Fudge greeted him rather reluctantly, fearing another tirade similar to Bellatrix Lestrange's. Cornelius Fudge also had stronger feelings about Sirius Black. He had good memories of Bellatrix Lestrange as a well-brought-up, beautiful society woman from a good family who had married well. Though he had been horrified by her crimes against the Longbottoms and those she had participated in as a Death Eater, he had blamed her fall on being under a bad influence. He considered Bellatrix Lestrange to be almost tragic in a way, so much potential that was wasting away in this prison. Sirius Black, on the other hand, though also from a good family, had always been a bad apple. His betrayal of his friends, though, made his crimes even more despicable. Bellatrix Lestrange may have severely injured the Longbottoms, but she had left their infant son alone. Sirius Black helped the Dark Lord hunt down the Potters so he could kill their baby son. His deeds seemed blacker for this. "Well, I suspect afternoons are better when you are not locked up in this place," Sirius replied with a wry smile. "True," Fudge agreed, fingering his pocket watch, which showed his desire to get this finished up with so he could leave. Sirius glanced a rolled-up newspaper in the inner pocket of the Prime Minister's coat. "Are you done with your paper, sir?" "Paper?" Fudge asked in confusion, then remembered the Daily Prophet he had tucked into his coat pocket. "Oh, yes, I am. May I have it?" Black asked, trying to put on his most charming smile and making a good effort, though it fell short of his pre-Azkaban smiles. "It gets rather dull in here." Unnerved by the request, Fudge agreed and handed it over. As he walked away, he wondered if he had made a mistake. He shook his head. What harm could a newspaper do? The stories reported by the Daily Prophet were all ministry approved, and he certainly couldn't use it as a weapon to escape. For all he knew, Black may plan to use it as a toilet paper. Azkaban only provided the most basic necessities, and toilet paper was not one of them. The Daily Prophet echoed Bellatrix Lestrange's question, what happened to Harry Potter? Every year, near the anniversary of the Potters' deaths, the Daily Prophet asked this question. Every year it rehashed what was known. Every year, Rita Skeeter's accounts of the facts became more embellished and to the point that they were no longer facts. Her dramatic flair kept this story alive, and each year her theories became more outlandish. It was probably a sad remark on the intelligence of the Wizard World citizens that they never noticed her discrepancies, and instead of tossing the paper aside in disgust, they hungered for more, which she was happy to give. Rita knew how to play this game. Fudge approved her stories so long as she was careful not to implicate the Ministry in any wrongdoing. Though Fudge often consulted Dumbledore as an advisor, and they were considered friends, he didn't seem to particularly mind when Rita suggested that Dumbledore was to blame for Harry Potter's disappearance. Dumbledore's reputation had suffered a bit the last 2 years due to the boy's disappearance. Though Rita Skeeter was a poison pin, one could not dispute the fact that it had been Dumbledore's idea to place the boy with his relatives. It had been his responsibility to protect the boy. That the boy disappeared under his nose called into question his competency. It was bad enough that he lost the Wizard World's savior, but Harry Potter had been the prophesied chosen one, the only one that could destroy the Dark Lord if he returned. Sirius Black had known Rita Skeeter, who had been in his year at Hogwarts. She had always been a horrible gossip, talented at turning people against each other. He was not inclined to believe anything that she said. Still, he read her story with horror. Unlike Bellatrix, he had been cut off from the Wizard World and didn't hear much news. He had been fantasizing about his godson Harry coming to Hogwarts, becoming a talented wizard and a great seeker like his dad. He remembered how Harry, as a toddler, had zoomed around on the toy broom he had given him. Though it was actually too old of a gift for him, Harry had shown talent and hadn't lost his seat. He almost killed the cat and broke a hideous vase, but he was his father's son. Sirius had dreamed that somehow he would be able to prove his innocence and get released from Azkaban, and then he could be free to raise Harry, and he could find solace in losing his best friend and raising James' son. It was that dream that had sustained him in Azkaban, the one happy thought that the Dementors hadn't successfully sucked out of him. Now this one hope was being dashed as he read Skeeter's article. She was no doubt embellishing quite a bit, but there was one disturbing fact that was apparently true. Harry had disappeared, and no one knew what happened to him. Sirius put the paper down and gulped painfully. His grief threatened to overwhelm him. This was too much. He swallowed again, trying to gain control over his feelings. I have to find him, Sirius thought. I owe it to James and Lily. I owe it to Harry. His features began to change as he morphed back into a dog. He wasn't sure if it would work, but he had to try. A few hours later, his cell door opened as a Dementor came in to give him his food. The Dementor, though, could not find the prisoner. It didn't pay attention to the dog that slipped by it and went out the door. And so, the Auror continued down the hallway, trying to determine where the scratching sounds were coming from. The wizard scraped his fingers on the nearby table as sound effects for the story he was telling to his captivated audience and the three broomsticks. As he drew near, he realized they were coming from the cupboard beneath the stairs. His heart was pounding, and part of him wanted to just flee the house. Yet, as if he were under the imperious curse, something was compelling him to open the cupboard door. He held his wand out in defense, but his hand was shaking so bad he could barely keep hold of it. With his free hand, he undid the latch, and then very slowly the door swung open. The storyteller paused for dramatic effect. Well, what happened? Justin Finch Fletchy asked, wide-eyed. I don't know if I should continue, the storyteller replied, shaking his head. I might give you kids nightmares, and I promised my buddy at the Auror office I would never tell anyone this story. Oh, please, Ernie Macmillan pleaded. You can't just leave us hanging like that. The storyteller pretended to relent, drawing an amused look from Madame Rosmerta. He continued. The cupboard was still too dark to see. The Auror, his voice nearly gone with fear, squeaked, Lumos, to as light as wand. He almost wished he hadn't as soon as the inside of the cupboard was illuminated. There was blood, lots of blood on the walls, too much blood. When you see that much blood, you know that the person who bled it out is no longer among the living. In the cupboard, there was a small bed, and under the covers there was a small lump that was moving. It seemed to be the source of the scratching sounds. The Auror's hand shook even worse, but somehow he managed to pull up the blanket. What a ghastly sight did he behold! It was an arm, a little boy's arm. Though it wasn't attached to its body, the fingers on the hand were still moving. They were scratching against the wall, which is the sound that Auror had been hearing throughout the house. Hannah Abbott's hand flew to her mouth. All the other Hufflepuffs stared at the man with huge eyes and open mouths. Behind them, a Gryffindor girl looked up from a book she was reading and shook her head in disgust. Did the Auror live? Justin asked. Well, of course he did, the storyteller replied. How else would he have told me this story? Oh, good, another Hufflepuff girl said weakly. The storyteller held up a finger. But the worst was yet to come. The Auror wanted to run when he saw that hand, but it was like his legs were stuck to that floor. Suddenly the hand jumped up and it pulled at a sack that was hanging from the wall, a sack the Auror hadn't noticed before, being a bit too distracted by the severed arm and all. Something rolled out of the sack and hit the floor. It rolled behind the Auror's legs. He turned around quickly to see what it was. It was a human head, a little boy's head to be precise. The eyes were closed and it had black unruly hair. On its forehead there was a red mark in the shape of a lightning bolt, a cursed mark. Well, the Aura was scared out of his wits by then. Don't tell anyone that I told you this, but he even lost control of his bladder. He was so scared. And then suddenly, the eyes on that horrible severed head opened and stared at the Aura. The storyteller paused, looking at the frightened Hufflepuffs, who were hanging on to every word of his story. Then he continued. The Aura wanted to scream, but he was frozen in terror. Then the mouth formed a wicked smile, and it opened up and said to him, "Happy Halloween!" The Hufflepuffs stared at him blankly. Then they started to get it, and a few laughed weakly. Justin Finch Fletchley shook his head. "Man, you had me going there." At another table behind the Hufflepuffs, Fred and George Weasley looked at each other and grinned. "Now that is a great idea for our future store, Georgie," Fred said. He reached out his hand and clawed at the air and said in a spooky voice, "The hand of Harry Potter." George shook his head. "Hand? I think it would be better to have the head." Fred thought about it for a moment, and then the twins looked at each other and said in unison, "We'll make both."